Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome again, and thank you for joining us on whatever platform you are listening on. I hope you guys are doing well, and I think today's topic is one that we all have experience in one way or the other, because we're talking about pressing and how the press can shape your team's identity, how it can shape your team's philosophy, and the individual skills that are going to be needed to make sure that you're running the press effectively. And to help bring some insight into this topic, I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Clay Davis. Coach, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing quite well, thank you. And like I said, I'm excited to get into this. I think all coaches at some point or the other are either looking to implement their press, improve their press, or reflect on their press. So I think there's going to be a lot of good knowledge for coaches to reflect and think about here today. But before we get into that, like I do with all of my guests, Coach, I do want to talk about your basketball journey, your coaching journey, where it's been, where it's taken you, and where you are currently at right now. So, Coach, want to go ahead and tell us about your coaching journey?
Sure. So I knew probably, I think my senior year of high school, that I wanted to be in athletics or be involved in athletics, once I got into the real world. And I just think that somewhere along the line, it clicked with me that the best way to do that would be to coach. I was always a student of the game, loved the game, and just kind of made sense for me. And so, as soon as I went to college, I started doing everything that I could to try to prepare myself. I got involved with our Little Dribblers program, where I'm from and where I played, and things I was just doing everything that I could to get as much experience as I could. And so, upon graduation, I was actually hired at my alma mater, Hardin-Jefferson High School, and I was a junior high coach there for a year. Coached the 7th grade team. And after 1 year, I had the opportunity to move to Hardin-Jefferson High School, where I became the freshman basketball coach and a varsity assistant basketball coach. So I did that for 3 more years, and of course loved it. It's where I was from. It's, Hardin-Jefferson is a very unique situation, in that basketball is very important to the community. It's had a lot of success, and being from there and having played there on a state championship team and a regional finalist team, it was just kind of a great situation for me to start my coaching career, and was also working with one of the other assistants was a teammate of mine on those teams.
Wow.
So just really a great way for me to, I guess, jump into the coaching profession with both feet. So I guess after 4 years at Hardin-Jefferson, I kind of started, I had the itch and thought I was ready to take that jump to become a head basketball coach. Started searching, and oddly enough, a superintendent at Tatum ISD, which is up near Longview, Texas, was a Hardin-Jefferson graduate, and he was looking for someone that could come in and try to get a basketball program going in a school that was primarily known for its football program and its track program. Mm-hmm. And so in the year 2000, I started in 1996 at Hardin-Jefferson, and 4 years later in 2000, I was hired as the boys head basketball coach at Tatum High School. I went to Tatum, not really knowing what to expect. Literally, my wife and I had just gotten married. We got back from our honeymoon on a Saturday, and we moved to Tatum on a Sunday. And we just kind of, no real time to really process anything, except that with the superintendent there that I knew that was a former Hardin-Jefferson basketball player, and had been told Tatum had great athletes and that I would be given an opportunity to get a program going that had been traditionally not very good. I thought, you got to jump at this opportunity. So we moved about 3 hours north of where Hardin-Jefferson is, and went in there and really tried to create a vision in that program, and had a lot of success. We won. We were actually three-way tie for the district championship my first year, and ended up winning the three-way tie and advancing to the playoffs. And that was the first district championship that they had in, oh gosh, I know it had been at least 15 years, if not more. Yeah. And they had won 7 games total in the 2 years prior. So the fact that we were contending for a district championship was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And we did it with all sophomores and juniors. So we had everybody coming back. My second year there, we went 26-8 and advanced all the way to the regional tournament, which in Texas, that's the same as the Sweet 16, in the NCAA tournament. When we lost to the regional semifinals to who eventually represented our region in the state tournament. And so 2 years there, we had things rolling, still had a real solid core coming back, and did not plan on leaving, but a job opportunity or a job came open that I had always thought was kind of a sleeping giant, and that was Jasper High School in Jasper, Texas, which was still over in the East Texas corridor, but it was actually about 2 hours closer to our hometown, near her family and my family. And the athletic director there was actually a former basketball coach in the Beaumont area, Chris Coleman. And I had known Chris for a long time. So I knew that he would be serious about, establishing a basketball program in Jasper. And so I applied for that job and got it. And we moved south 2 hours to Jasper, Texas. And kind of the same deal there. Jasper actually was just dropping down a classification. They had been Class 4A, and they were dropping down to Class 3A, and had a good portion of a playoff team returning. Their biggest issue was that they were not really consistent. They'd make the playoffs, once every few years or whatnot, and then they'd be really, really bad, really inconsistent. Mm-hmm. But kind of like Tatum, they were known for their football and track programs, and really, really phenomenal athletes. I mean, guys that played in the NFL, like Sean Weatherspoon, that played linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons. He played for me in Jasper. He also played for Arizona. And then Big Red Bryant, that played defensive tackle for the Seattle Seahawks. He played for me. And so that's the kind of athletes that you were being blessed with in Jasper, Texas. The issue was that very little of their focus or time and energy went into basketball. And so anyway, we got there, and first year there, we were district co-champs, won the district, and actually advanced to the regional quarterfinals, the third round of the playoffs, and again had a bulk of our team coming back. And so here I was 3 years into being a head coach, and I think only 28 years old at the time. And I'm going, okay, well, our next natural step is we're going to be in the regional tournament next year, kind of like we were in Tatum. And kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. And so in the off season leading up to what would have been the 2003-2004 season, my son was diagnosed with a kidney disease called minimal change nephrotic syndrome. Got a call from a nursery one day that he was at, and he woke up with his eyes swollen shut from his nap. And that event really started a string of really life-changing events for us that ultimately were for the better, but put us through a really, really tough time. That season, I missed probably a month of the season total. I missed 2 weeks straight of the district season while we were in the hospital in Galveston with my son. My assistant coaches were having to run the show. And we actually missed the playoffs by one game that year. And at the end of that year, we pretty much had to make a decision. What are we going to do from here? The doctors had told my wife, you're going to have to quit work and stay at home with your son. He's got to be in an environment where he's not around other kids and can get sick and these sorts of things, because it was an immune deficiency disease that he had.
Right.
And her home was Lumberton, Texas, which is not too far, 15 minutes from where I grew up. And we had to make a decision, and we thought the best thing for us was to move back home. And Jasper being an hour away, I just really felt like there was no way making a 2-hour round trip every day that I could do the things that I needed to do with and for my family and still appropriately run a basketball program the way I like to run one. And so I felt like one of those things was going to suffer, and I wasn't willing to allow either of those things to suffer. So made a tough decision that year in the spring of 2004, resigned as the head basketball coach at Jasper, and I actually took the assistant's job at Hardin-Jefferson, my alma mater, where I was from. And they had just hired a guy named Todd Sutherland, who will eventually be in the Texas High School Basketball Hall of Fame, has over 700 career wins, been to the state tournament 7 times, won 3 state championships. But even more importantly, he was the assistant coach on my high school teams when I played. And so it just seemed like a natural decision. The right decision to make was to go back, be an assistant with him, where I could take a step back, have a little more flexibility in my schedule to be with my family as need be as we work through this sickness with my son, and yet still be in a situation that was a great basketball situation. It was where I'm from, where I started my career. And so, I thought naturally, I'll be an assistant for a couple of years, and then I'll get another head coaching job, and, we'll be off and running again. Mm-hmm. And, you know what they say about making plans, that God's got some different plans for you, and he'll laugh at you. And he sure did for me. I ended up staying at Hardin-Jefferson for 10 years as an assistant coach.
Wow.
In that time, I passed over several really good head coaching opportunities in the area. Yeah. But the difference for me always was, one, the basketball situation is so good at Hardin-Jefferson that the other head coaching situations I would have been going to weren't as good as the assistant situation I had.
Right.
And then the fact that I really knew deep down that I always wanted my 2 boys to go to Hardin-Jefferson. That's where I really wanted my kids to go, because it's such a great academic school. It's just a place where, kids are exposed to all different sorts of cultures, and just a great place. And so I kind of got in that point where, okay, my kids are getting close to school age. My son is fully recovered. Do I really want to move or change schools and then try to end up back here? Because ultimately my dream when I started my coaching career was to end up being the head coach at Hardin-Jefferson one day.
Yeah.
And so was there for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, Coach Sutherland was offered a job at East Chambers High School, which is about 15 minutes away from us, from Hardin-Jefferson. And they just kind of made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, being as close to retirement as he was. And so in 2014, he took the East Chambers High School job, and I was immediately promoted to head coach at Hardin-Jefferson. And I have been there for the last 6 years. And that brings us to this.
It sort of all came full circle, and all kind of brought you back to Hardin-Jefferson. It kind of all roads kind of took you right back there.
Exactly.
There's a lot there with kind of mentioning the connections that you have with other ADs, and that were able to kind of help you out because of that connection you had of them being a Hardin-Jefferson alum as you are yourself. Another thing that stuck with me was when you did have to step away for a while, is for coaches to make sure that they trust their staff and make sure that they trust the people that are their assistants and work with them, because you never know what's going to happen in life, or you may have to step away and your assistants may have to take a lot more work than you previously thought they would have to. And then I do want to follow up about you kind of taking that step back and not only going from being a head coach to an assistant, but then also maintaining that position for a while. For a lot of coaches, once they get to that point where they get to that head coaching spot, they look at anything else as going backwards if they have to take a step back. You mentioned your specific situation and circumstances that you faced, but in general, why might a coach need to step back from all of the demands of being a varsity coach and maybe look into taking a role as an assistant coach? What are some things that a coach might want to be considering or thinking about to think to themselves, okay, maybe this is a little too much and maybe I need to step back? What are some considerations that you think coaches might want to take if that might be a decision that they have to make or are thinking about making?
Well, there's an old saying, it's what you learn after you know it all that really matters. And, I think anybody that's been in that position, I became a head coach at what I think a lot of people would consider a fairly young age. I was 25 years old.
Yeah.
I had been coaching for 4 years. And I really thought I was ready. And I was just gung ho, and, you're energetic and you got all these ideas, and when you're an assistant, you may not necessarily feel like you can just do the things the way that you want them to do. And you're really just raring to go and you want your own program. And I think that's so perfectly natural. And I think that probably comes at different times for every coach individually, just kind of based on, what they've been through personally, basketball wise. And I just know for me at 25, like I was ready. I wanted my own program. And, we went and I feel like in a lot of ways I did a really good job. Obviously we were very successful in the 4 years that I was a head coach, and, made the regional tournament and, won 20 plus games every year but one, and 3 district championships and all of those great things. So on the surface, I think a lot of people might look at that, the resume aspect of it, and go, well, he's crazy for thinking that becoming an assistant was ultimately a good thing. He was doing fine. But now looking back on it, it was probably one of the greatest blessings that ever happened to me. I think I was headed down a path coaching wise where I was starting to feel somewhat invincible. You go in and your first 3 years as a head coach, you win the district.
Yeah. And
you're in the regional tournament in year 2 as a head coach. And, you kind of just feel like I've got this thing figured out. And it's borderline arrogance. And I think that's easy to happen at such a young age. If you have quick success like that, you can kind of start resting on your laurels, start feeling like you've got this figured out, and it doesn't really matter what happens. You're going to be able to, recreate the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And so when I was, faced with the decision of family versus career, for me, that while it was a tough decision, it was a fairly easy decision to make sure that my family had what it needed. And honestly, those first probably 2.5 years where I was back at Hardin-Jefferson as an assistant with Coach Sutherland, it wasn't very easy. I spent more time thinking about, when my next head coaching opportunity would come over. I spent more time, trying to prepare for what I didn't know was going to happen. And somewhere towards the end of year 2, oddly enough, my first year as an assistant, we won 29 games, and we got upset in the first round of the playoffs by Jasper. All the kids that I had left and coached turned around and upset us in the first round of the playoffs.
Wow.
Very, very bittersweet moment for me personally.
Right.
And then our second year, we lose again in the first round of the playoffs. And if people may not be familiar with Hardin-Jefferson, but the expectations are well beyond first round of the playoffs. Regional tournaments, state tournaments are kind of the expectations at Hardin-Jefferson. So we were sitting there after 2 years and 2 first-round losses, kind of licking our wounds a little bit. And I actually was very close to getting out of the coaching profession. I was feeling the stress of my wife not being able to work, us becoming a single income family.
Yeah.
I need to go make more money. This is not turning out the way that I thought it would be. We're not even, by our standards at Hardin-Jefferson, we're not very good right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually went on an interview to a copy sales corporation to start selling copying machines, because I heard if you do that and you're successful, you can work your way into pharmaceutical sales, which is where the money would be.
Yeah.
And I actually went on that interview, and on the way home, driving home with my wife, she asked me, and I just told her, I said, there's just something in my gut that's telling me not to do this, to stick it out. What we had everybody coming back, even though we weren't very good by our standards and losing in the first round, we did have everybody coming back, and there was just something tugging at me saying, this is not what you need to do right now. And so I pretty much made a commitment at that time. And this is kind of where things really, really changed for me. Mm-hmm. Is that, okay, if I'm going to stick with this and I'm going to be an assistant, then I'm going to be the best dang assistant that I can be. Yeah. And I'm going to dive in, and I'm going to embrace this role. And I'm just going to start valuing, just each little day and each little challenge that comes our way. And I've got to be okay with being an assistant. It's not the end of the world. You've got a healthy child. You're able to provide for your family. There are worse situations. And,
right.
It's funny, things really from that moment on kind of turned. I could tell that Coach Sutherland really was fully trusting me as an assistant now, giving me much more freedom. It's almost like it took us 2 years to really kind of just kind of jive, even though I have known him my entire life because he coached me in high school. And so we go into that next year, and we go 38-2 and win a Class 3A state championship. And I look back now and I go, wow, I was that close to missing out on that experience. But even more importantly, it started a run of 6 years in a row that we were in the regional tournament. And during that time, we were in the regional tournament, or in the regional finals, 4 out of those 6 years, which would be the Elite Eight. We made it to the state tournament twice. We won it once, and we lost in the state semifinals once in overtime. And what I learned in that entire process is that once I dove in and just tried to be the best assistant I could be, I started seeing the game so differently. Having that head coaching experience, but more importantly, I really learned how to utilize assistants because I was seeing how Coach Sutherland was utilizing me.
Yeah.
And giving me the freedom to coach, and giving me the freedom to have input. And like I said, this is a Hall of Fame coach. This is a guy who has every right in the world to not utilize his assistants, but is just such a humble and great human being that once that trust was really developed, the sky was the limit. And those are the things that during that decade, and that feels weird to say that, but for an entire decade, I was learning and probably didn't even realize it at the time because I just really dove so far into just trying to be the best assistant I could be. And with every passing year that went by, there was more freedom for me to coach. There was more involvement for me. And I didn't realize it till afterwards how much I learned that, man, if you really, really just let your assistants help you, and if you let them take ownership, and if you let them be involved like they want to be involved, you can create a staff yourself that is as good as you're going to find. And that really starts with the head coach. those are things that I missed out on, as a young head coach. You don't know any better.
Yeah.
You're ready to do it all yourself, and you really don't trust it because you don't trust anybody to do it the way you think it needs to be done. And I think that's natural for young head coaches. And so those are the things that I learned that I would tell young head coaches is, man, surround yourself with guys. And if you don't trust them or you don't know them right away, then that's on you to get to know them, to spend time with them, to talk basketball with them, to teach them your system and the way you believe things so that you can have those relationships and you do feel comfortable giving them the freedoms. Because I didn't do that in Tatum and Jasper as much as I wish that I would have now looking back.
Right. Well, it's so true that for some people who get that coaching job at a young age, and if they never take a step back, then they're always the one in charge, and they're not necessarily in a position where they're learning under somebody if they were an assistant, and sometimes they think, or it's possible to get in that mindset of like thinking you're going to change the game because you know everything, and then you end up not trusting your assistants, and then it's very easy to kind of fall into a trap where you almost stop learning and you just want to do everything on your own and you only trust yourself. And that being able to take that step back allows you to learn under somebody else, learn how to be a great assistant, and then, like you said, know what you want out of assistants because you were able to be in that role yourself. And something else you said that I think a lot of people iterate, and I think it's so true, that even if you're in an assistant coaching position, to be where you are and make the most of it, and like you said, just dive right into it and make the most out of it. Sometimes assistant coaches, and you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but sometimes assistant coaches, it's a great gig because they just get to focus on the X's and O's, where the head coach has to all focus and manage a lot of other things.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's what your experience was too. A lot of times assistants just get to do the basketball stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, they get the opportunity to really dive into all of that and not have to necessarily manage. They could, but maybe not have to manage all the other things that definitely a head coach is also responsible for taking care of as well. So
and one other thing I'd throw in there for young head coaches is, and I don't know for sure that this happened with me, but I see how it could, that if you don't make a concerted effort to utilize your assistant coaches, they're going to check out at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're not going to have that valuable input that you need at a crucial time, because they will have checked out because they don't feel like they have enough ownership, or they don't feel like you take their opinion, not that you have to agree, but that you don't take their input seriously. And then you really will be alone in a time where you may need, other eyes and other mouths.
Right.
So I think that's more reason to really make concerted efforts to do that.
And I think your players are going to notice that too, and they're not going to go to your assistants, or they're not going to value your assistants maybe as much as you want them to, if they see that you're not incorporating them that much, or you're not making an effort to include them and make them feel like they're a part of the coaching staff and the decisions and things of that nature. Absolutely. All right, Coach. So we're gonna dive in here to pressing and about using the press and shaping your team's identity and philosophy with it. So before we get into any sort of ins and outs or anything schematic, one of the things you mentioned to me on an off-air conversation is how you believe in the idea of a team being above the individual, above all, like the team and the team aspect above the individual. So do you think that a team needs to have that sort of mindset to even run the press the right way? Are there things behind the scenes or in team building that coaches need to make sure that they're developing before they can even think about installing a press effectively?
Well, personally, I think that philosophy's got to be in place regardless of what system you run. I mean, I really feel, especially at the high school level, that kids have to learn how to be servants, how to serve others, and not just on the court, but off the court. And it's so tough. I tell our kids all the time, believe it or not, I think today's teenagers have it way, way more difficult than I did when I was growing up because of
Yeah,
social media and
I
because
agree.
of information access. There's so much stuff that you see, whether it's true or not. These kids get on Twitter and, they played in a tournament this weekend and they're seeing their other buddies get hyped up by one of the rankers or one of the, experts out there, and they wonder why they're not getting hyped up. And so there's just all this internal pressure to shine, to put up stats. I mean, we are such a stat-based society now because of fantasy and because of social media that, in a lot of ways, that's the only way kids gauge success. And so, for us personally, one of the things that I've done in our program is we don't talk about individual statistics publicly. When I make a post about our game results, whether it be on our Facebook page or on our Twitter page, I'm going to talk about the Hawks won or lost the game, and I'm going to talk about the team played well or could have played better. We never talk about who the leading scorer was. We don't talk about who the leading rebounder was. And I told my guys, if you're looking for individual promotion from me as a coach, that's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna individually promote our players. Now, our exceptions obviously are after the season, if a kid is voted to the all district, all region, all state, or if a kid earns an individual accolade that's voted on by someone else,
Right.
then we're going to acknowledge that. That's when other people make those decisions and other people decide that someone on our team was worthy of recognition, then obviously we're going to promote that. We talk about stats and shooting percentages and things like that within our team, within our locker room. So I don't want it to sound like, we never talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
We just don't promote individual success. We don't have anything individually posted in our locker room. Yes, we keep stats for all of our games. Yes, I will talk about stats with individual players. Hey, look here, you're turning it over way too much or things like that. But we are not going to go out and base our success on whether or not somebody is scoring 20 points a game. And honestly, this year I thought was one of our best examples. We won 27 games this year. Made it to the second round of the playoffs. We were district co-champs, and our leading scorer averaged 10.8 points per game, and we averaged 75 points a game, and our leading score was 10.8 points a game.
Got spread out.
Yeah, and so we had 5 scorers that were between 8.3 points and 10.8 points a game, and I think our kids saw it this year. We were difficult to guard because of that, because there wasn't just one guy to focus on. But anyway, those are the things that I try to do and try to get our kids to see by setting that example. I'm not going to go out and celebrate individual accomplishments. We don't talk about 1,000-point club or anything like that, because that's not what I want our kids to be focused on. I want our kids to be focused on when the Hawks have more points than the other team, everybody's happy. And so, but that's just, I think that's more of a program philosophy. I do think it benefits on the court, but not necessarily just the press or just a certain style. I think it benefits any style of defense or offense to have guys that truly don't care about the individual stuff. They just want the team success.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. When whatever you emphasize, whatever you promote is going to be reflected on the way that your players act and the way that your players perform, and the things that you, I think, as a coach, draw attention to and promote and are like, these are the things that I want. Most likely, those are going to be the things that your players respond to. So if you don't really amplify the individual as much as the team, then they're going to want to rise to that expectation of making sure the team's successful, because that's what they know that the coach wants, and then as the team, that's what they want, and then probably leads to a lot happier people in general, because they're not focusing on getting their baskets, or focus on getting assists or things like that. They're just wanting to make the play that they need to make in order for their team to be successful, which probably makes it also by extension a lot easier to coach that way, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a process trying to establish that mentality, and something that you said, just make the right play. We talk about that all the time, and kids are so caught up in college scholarships and things like that. And I've had to really work hard to convince these kids, you don't have to score 20 points a game to go to college to play basketball. And oddly enough, the proof is in the pudding now. Is 2 years ago, my starting point guard averaged 5.4 points a game. He's now playing college basketball. My oldest son, who was sick that we talked about earlier, he just graduated this year. He's going to play basketball at Manhattan Christian College in Manhattan, Kansas. He averaged 8.8 points a game this year, and he's a shooter, scorer, and he only averaged 8 points a game. So in the last 2 years, we've had two kids average less than 10 points a game and are going to play college basketball. And so it's kind of nice to have, you can sit there and preach something, but when you got some physical examples that kids can look at and go, wow, he's not lying, that always helps.
Yeah. Exactly. It's no, you don't need to score this much. Why? Well, here's my proof why, because we have so and so that are playing a college basketball, and here's what their stats look like. And yeah, that's always a good thing when you're able to back that up with real examples of players that you had.
Right.
So yeah, I'm sure that helps a lot. So you and I both mentioned now about making the right play. So let's go into the press here and what making the right play looks like schematically. So this is very broad, because I want to make sure that you're emphasizing the points of this that you find important. So in a broader sense, what do your presses look like? What is your philosophy about the best opportunities to get what you want out of the press? And we'll start with that. So basically, what are the types of presses that you're looking to do, and where do you find the best opportunities to get what you want when implementing those presses?
So, and I think I mentioned this to you in some of our beforehand conversations,
Mm-hmm.
but we've had a system in place at Hardin-Jefferson since 1989, and that was my sophomore year in high school, when my high school coach then came back to Hardin-Jefferson. He had left, gone to a bigger school, and come back. And he's now actually the executive director for the University Interscholastic League. But he implemented this system that was a combination of the Loyola Marymount numbered fast break offensively, which we all remember those Loyola Marymount teams that led the nation in scoring. And it was the Rick Pitino defensive pressing system. And so he implemented that in 1989, and Hardin-Jefferson's just done a good job of really hiring coaches over these years that, played at Hardin-Jefferson, know the Hardin-Jefferson system, so that there was always been this consistency. So I'd say that's one of the biggest keys, is that, if you want to press and run, you've got to commit to that style of basketball. For me, there's really no, living life in between. Now, does that mean you're helter-skelter, pedal to the metal, 32 minutes every single game all the time? No, but it just means that you're committed to that base philosophy of, we're going to press no matter what, and then you're always willing to adjust. So for us, our press, our base press, and the press that we're in 98% of the time is what a lot of people will just call it a diamond press.
Right.
I think what kind of makes ours different is that it's actually a matchup. And we are, man to man before the ball comes in, zone after the ball comes in. And then the other thing that I think makes us different from a lot of other people that try to press is that we press make or miss.
Okay.
So we are in our press no matter what. And then the other question I get from a lot of guys is, well, what do you fall back to?
Yeah.
We fall back to our press. It's the same defense all over the floor. And so that keeps it simple, but also I think helps make it effective because it's just constant pressure of pressuring the ball no matter where we're at on the floor all the time.
And so with that, some coaches and even myself, I'm also like curious. You said make or miss, and so what's the philosophy behind that? Is it just this is who we are, so whether you miss, we're gonna get into what we need to? Is that something that's always been in place, that even on a miss, we're gonna make sure that we get into our press, and we're gonna be this team that's pressing, make or miss?
Yeah, well, so and before I say this is certainly not intended to question any of, there's a million ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's not intended to disparage or put down or question anyone else's philosophy. But for me personally, I've never understood the philosophy of only press after makes. I mean, I get that it's easier to set up your press because the ball's gone through the net and they've got to get out and throw it in. But at the same time, you're now allowing your offensive success to determine your defensive pressure. And so if you're having one of those nights where you're shooting the ball terrible, then you're not pressing as much. And if you're not pressing as much, then you're not doing all the things that ultimately a press does to a team, which fatigues them. Just makes them sick of being hounded like a bunch of gnats flying around you the whole time. And to me, those are the main points of a press, is to wear a team down, to get individual players on a team just wanting to get rid of the ball so quickly that they end up making mistakes. And if you're only doing that after you make a shot, you're really limiting, the amount of times that you can do that. But if we're doing it make or miss, so that's the one thing we know. And oddly enough, if you do it make or miss, on those bad shooting nights, you're more likely to create some easy scoring opportunities for yourself. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you only do it after makes, I think it's very easy to fall into a game that really bogs down and slows down, which is, if you're an up-tempo coach and a pressing coach, that's not what you want.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense in that if the shots aren't falling, there's nothing like a couple transition layups or steals and easy looks to see the ball go in a couple times to kind of just get your offense going. And then obviously we know that a press can create those opportunities. So then it sounds like if you are going to press even on a miss, that means that everybody on the court has to know how to work every position of a diamond press or any press that you run. Am I correct in saying that everybody's got to know every part on the floor and where to be and what to do?
You are, in a sense, but honestly, I want our kids to understand all the parts of the press so that they learn to trust their teammates in the rotations.
Right.
But I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're getting at is that, if you're running, some sort of motion on offense and you miss a shot and, your guy on the right wing of the press is on the left side of the floor, he just needs to stay over there. And for us, that's not what we do. He will still run over to the right side of the floor. And so they'll still go to their press spots after a miss. Obviously with things transitioning, that doesn't always happen ideally.
Yeah.
And we get that and we understand that. And so the biggest way to make that work and to get kids to understand how to do that is by playing and scrimmaging. And that's a topic of conversation that gets brought up a lot with us, because those of us that run our system and the coaching tree is pretty big now, because it started with Charles Brydup, and it's all the people that played for him and coached under him have branched out and still run this system. Is that why do you guys scrimmage so much? And why do you scrimmage your JV? What good do you get out of scrimmaging your JV? And what we're talking about right now is a great example of what we get out of that, is that we get those scenarios in live action every day of pressing after a miss that you can't create in a drill. There's just no way to create those things in an organized practice drill. The only way to get repetitions is to toss it up and play. And so our guys every day, one thing we know is we're going to scrimmage every single day live. And it may only be a quarter or 2 quarters, but we're going to go live. And so our guys get so many repetitions where they learn how to cover for each other. They learn, okay, I got to stay here and stop the ball right now, and then I'll get to my press spot as soon as I get an opportunity. And so our guys really, really do a good job of understanding, when it's time to make sure I'm in the right spot and when it's time to just react and play, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, so that the best way for them to understand how to react to these situations and be able to be where they need to be is they have to experience them over and over and be able to just see how it looks in real game situation, and that's why you're emphasizing the scrimmaging and making sure that they're seeing what those opportunities are going to look like in a live situation. So
right.
Yeah, I mean that seems like a logical answer to that question that then coaches would ask you about, well, why do we scrimmage so much? Well, this is how the players can see what it's actually going to look like.
Right.
And so on a kind of a behind the scenes level, that there seems to be some things that a coach who really wants to be good and get good and make pressing part of their identity, there's going to be some behind the scene things that coaches are going to want to make sure that they develop and also within their practice planning as well. You mentioned obviously just now about scrimmaging, but are there other things that coaches need to make sure that they're intentional about, that they're teaching or emphasizing before they can even install the press overall, basically like those individual kind of pieces that they got to make sure that they're thinking about developing first?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing is that a coach needs to sit down and be honest with himself or herself about, can they coach a pressing team? Because if you are a micromanager type coach, and I don't mean that in an ugly way, I mean that in that you like things to be very, very organized, and you expect guys to be in certain spots at certain times, and you're very methodical in your thinking. It may be tough for you to really, really be a full-time pressing team. You have to be willing to allow players to make plays. You have to be willing to know that they're going to make mistakes. You have to be willing to know that you may give up some layups here and there. And that's probably the biggest thing that so many coaches that I talk to is that they give up a couple of layups in a row and they want to get out of it. They're bailing. And that's really the price you pay sometimes to establish the tempo of a game, with the philosophy being, we may give up a few layups early when they're fresh and they're organized, but as this organized chaos ensues over the course of fourth quarters, we'll make up for those couple of layups that we gave up. Now, that's not in any way to insinuate that we're okay with giving up layups. That's not the case.
Of course,
but that when you're pressing and when you're trying to cover 94 feet of a court, a team's going to have a game plan and they're going to execute it well early, and they may get some 2-on-1s against you and complete them. And you have to internally be okay with that, or at least be committed enough to what you're doing that you're not going to bail at the first time that happens. Mm-hmm. And so just like with everything else, there's so many different types of coaching and coaching mentalities and coaching philosophies that's the first thing I'd ask myself as a coach is, am I going to be okay with that? Can I learn to live with that and understanding the ebbs and flows of a game that will come when I'm pressing full time? That's going to be the biggest thing behind the scenes that a coach is going to have to figure out for himself. And then honestly, the tempo of practice becomes very important. For us, it's, we don't even have scheduled water breaks in our practice. I tell our guys, if you're off the court and you need water, go get it. And you better be back in there if I call your name, so that we're not stopping practice to have what, because to me that just slows down the tempo. And so everything that we do is, in a rhythm. Bam, bam, bam. We're moving. We're going one thing to the next. Now, that's not saying that I stick to my practice schedule,
Yeah.
just perfectly. No, I'm willing to go over 20 minutes on something if we're not doing it well. But everything we're doing has a real up-tempo feel to it, and we're hopping from one thing to the next. And, we're coaching on the run. My assistant coaches know I don't like to stop practice a ton and talk to everybody, because then it stops the tempo of practice. So what I want us to be doing is as a kid is coming off and we know the mistake that needs to be corrected, is that we're coaching them as they're coming off, and we're still moving on with the next, set of the drill or next rep of the drill. And I think all of those things are important. I think if you want to be an up-tempo team, you've got to be up-tempo in everything that you do, from how you practice to obviously how you play to how you coach. Everything's got to be done, at that pace, so that it's just what the kids are used to.
It sounds like you're running a mental press of sorts in your practice. Like you're mentally like running the press on them and making sure that they understand the tempo and what's needed. And that's so true about the not bailing after a couple layups. I think when I was younger, I was definitely of that mindset. If I was pressing and then there's a couple transition layups or a couple easy opportunities, that were scored against my press, I'm like, well, we're done pressing. And it was a coach that kind of pulled me aside and said, if you bail out of your press after a couple times, that either says that you don't believe in your girls or you don't believe in yourself. I was like, oh, and it made me kind of go through that revelation of like, okay, is this something I can handle? And I think that's super important. Can you handle giving up a couple layups? Because like you said, everybody can look great, the first quarter of a game, but then, what happens in that third and fourth quarter after you're still pressing, after you're still on them? One of the things I hear sometimes that is a concern, and so I'm just curious as to your mindset about this, is it's two parts. Number one is a concern that the players aren't going to be in shape enough and they're not going to be able to run it effectively 4 quarters, and also that we don't that teams like, the team doesn't have enough depth and we don't have enough bodies to be like subbing people in or out. So I'm curious kind of what your mindset is. Are you running a deep bench, or are your players that you have in, are there things that they understand in terms of the stamina and fitness that's required to play for you and run this press effectively?
Right. So I can tell you this, I just finished my 24th year of coaching, and I've always run this system. I've run this system with a 7-man rotation, and I've run this system with an 11-man rotation. So you've got to be willing to kind of gauge and shift based on your personnel, obviously, as any coach does, and the depth of your team. And, there's been years where I thought we were going to be 10 deep and we only ended up 7 deep. You got some guys that you think are going to be fine, and they just don't. They have a tough year for whatever reason, and that rotation shrinks down. The biggest thing that our kids understand, and I tell them this all the time. So I'm not a big believer in let's line up on the baseline and condition. We don't do that in our practices. We don't do that in our off season. What I tell our guys, you got 2 options. We can do that. I'm willing to do that. We can line up on the baseline and I'll condition you and get you in shape that way, or we can line up and play. And if you play as hard as you can, then you're going to play yourself into the kind of shape you need to be in to play the way we play, because we scrimmage that way as well. And so, okay, you've got a choice. You can either line up on the baseline and run, or we can scrimmage and play yourself into shape. And so a lot of times in our preseason, we've got set days where all we're doing is scrimmaging. We come into the gym during the athletic period and we toss the ball up, and we're getting 4 quarters in an hour. And I will purposely, make them play extended periods to push themselves through those perceived barriers if I can't go anymore or whatnot. A lot of times I'll have a group of kids, one group of 5 go for 6 minutes without coming out. And so you're talking about, 3/4 of an entire quarter of pressing for 94 feet and then doing the same thing on offense. That's the other thing, is that we're running just as hard on offense as we are on defense.
Right.
And I'm gonna make you do that for 6 minutes. And early on, I know they're going to be dragging, but it's more about, are they pushing themselves? And so that's kind of how I approach that. It works well for us, because what kid wouldn't rather just play themselves into shape as opposed to lining up on the line and running? Now, if we choose not to play hard, then we'll go do conditioning out on the track, or we'll do whatever we need to do, since you guys don't want to do it the fun way. And I think it does two things there. One, it gets us in the kind of shape that we need to be in to play that style of basketball. But two, it creates a habit of playing hard, because they know they got a choice. We can either just play as hard as we can, or we can go do it the old-fashioned way, the way they used to do it back in the day. And I tell our guys all the time, if you can only go 2 minutes as hard as you can, that's fine. Give me a fist in the air, I'll get you out, and when you're ready to go back in, you check yourself back into the game.
Yeah.
If it's during your time that you're normally playing, because we typically, if everything was equal and we were doing everything by the book, a guy's gonna go about 4 minutes a quarter, and then ideally we get them a break, within near the 4 minute mark that they've been playing in a quarter. So I tell them that's your goal, is to be able to go as hard as you can for 4 minutes ultimately. But if for some reason, as the game wears on, during that 4 minute stretch that you're supposed to be in, if you just need to come out for a second, give me a fist, we'll get you out, and then you check yourself back in when you're ready to go. Mm-hmm. And so I think they appreciate that. But just knowing, what the alternative solution to playing this way. And the thing that I think about kids is that kids want to play fast. Kids want to play free. They want to have the freedom to make choices and make decisions. Kind of the old give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. That's kind of my philosophy on basketball. I would rather teach them concepts and then give them the freedom to go play. Yeah. But if you want that freedom comes with a price, and that price is that you've got to be in the right kind of shape to do that. So that's kind of the message that I'm always giving to them is, everybody talks about they want to play fast and they want to play free and they want to do this, but if you want to do that, this is what we have to do to get there.
Yeah. So. Well, it sounds like another benefit that you also have with that mentality of not just running them along the baseline, but we're going to run hard and we're going to go hard to get you in shape as we're playing, is that if I were to run my players along the baseline, they can run really hard, but they're also not really thinking that much. And that if you're able to run them really hard as they're playing, they also have to work on making mental decisions while they're physically tired, which I think is another added benefit that you get out of that. Am I correct in thinking that?
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the big things that I preach to our guys is that, if you watch us on film, people are going to watch and go, oh man, they're giving up all kinds of open shots. We can get open shots here. We can get open shots there. But what I tell our guys that we understand is that, yes, we may be giving up open shots, but those teams are having to shoot those shots a lot quicker than what they're used to. And they're not used to shooting those shots in the back of their mind, knowing that somebody's about to run through in front of them. And so we're used to playing that way. And we're used to having people flying in front of us and behind us and never knowing where somebody's coming from. And I just know for me as a coach, I've always said this, I feel like it's much easier to get a fast-paced team to slow down if they have to than to get a slow-paced team to speed up if they have to.
Agreed.
And, I think it's kind of like a young kid who's super aggressive. I would rather have to reel back a super aggressive kid than to teach a really meek kid to be aggressive. I think it's much easier to get a really aggressive kid to know when to tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot easier to kind of turn something down a little bit than try and turn something up that isn't used to being turned up that much. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely agreed. So let's say, okay, a coach is ready, that they got the press philosophy down. The kids are going to be running, they're going to be working hard, they're going to be really athletic and be in shape and ready to go. And now it's time for them to work on like the little ins and outs of the press, whatever press it is that they want to implement. What are some individual elements in terms of skills or skill work that coaches need to be aware of and make sure that they're emphasizing so that their press doesn't fall apart, whether it's, communication, footwork, any of those skills? What are some things that you make sure that you're paying attention to on kind of like an individual skill level to make sure that the press the press parts are working the way they need to be?
So this is going to sound super simplistic and super elementary, but the people that I've talked to over the years about our system and our press, they are always amazed at how simplified everything really is. I would say that the most important thing is that kids are sprinting all the time, especially when the ball gets past you. Typically when a team gets through maybe the first wave of a press, that's when they start to relax. And that's why sprinting from behind is unequivocally the most important part of a press. And I would argue, without having the actual numbers to back it up, that I would argue that close to 3/4 of our turnovers that we cause come from sprinting from behind. And so, and that's, I think some guys are looking for these technical things of, you've got your feet a certain way when you trap, or no, you have to, when the ball gets past you, the play is never over. The play is never dead. You're always sprinting, especially when the ball gets past you. Something that we do is that we don't call a lot of fouls in our scrimmages early on. In the year. We kind of take the eat or be eaten mentality, so that our kids learn to play through the physicality of it all, and they learn to be physical. And then as we get closer to the season, we start officiating those scrimmages a little bit more realistically, and kind of wean ourselves off of just the uber aggressive, fouling when you're fouling type mentality. But yeah. I think that those are two really important things that make pressing systems work, is that kids understand that I'm never out of a play and I've got to sprint all the time, but especially when the ball's ahead of me. And then just that finding ways to create that super aggressive mentality is that we're gonna take chances. Something I always tell our kids, especially early in the year: if you're going to make a mistake, make it 100 miles an hour, and I'll live with it. So everything that we do is very much effort based. Now, as the season goes on and you start getting into the second round of your district opponents and people have scouted you, you've got to refine and execute. And so I don't want it to sound like we just roll the ball out and just tell them, go get it, boys. But when you're trying to establish this mentality, those are the things that I think have to be done first. Those are kind of your foundation to make everything else be successful, is that they feel the freedom that, okay, I can screw up as long as I'm going 100 miles an hour, as long as I'm playing hard, going full speed, coach can live with that. And I just really think that frees a player's mind to be willing to take chances and, get tips and get deflections, which any coach who coaches basketball knows that, tips and deflections are a huge part of a press, making a press successful. Even if you don't end up with the ball, you're making the team second guess everything they do, the more tips and deflections that you get. And so those are the things that I would say kind of build the mental foundation, things that we're focusing on, those things in any drill that we do. Sprinting, being willing to take chances, but doing everything 100 miles an hour.
Right. So then do you think in general, coaches tend to overemphasize some of these things, like the footwork and the communication part and the technique and the trapping part, and they overemphasize those, and they're not putting enough attention on the mentality and the hustle and the sprinting element of that? Is that something you found over your years coaching?
I've seen it. I have seen guys, what I've seen is when people will come ask us questions about what we do, because we've done it for so long that people just kind of know. I mean, it's really no secret what we're going to do or how we're going to play. Mm-hmm. But I'll get those questions of now when you're trapped, do you teach your guys to have their feet together touching? And I'm like, we don't teach them. We don't talk about that. We talk about trapping the guy and, trying to force a bad pass that the other guys can run through. And so I think for a lot of people, they're kind of caught off guard by that. And then I'm sure there's probably some people that think, oh, these guys just roll the ball out. That's what they do. And they got really good players. And that's fine too. We do have good players. We have good kids who have come up through a little dribbler system that's almost 60 years old now, that they learn to press and run and do the things that we do. But that's just come, with staying committed to something over the number of years that we have. But yeah, I think when it comes to pressing and playing fast, if you get too technical, you get that paralysis by analysis, where you got kids thinking too much instead of reacting. And something that my high school coach always said to us that stuck with me is that basketball is not a game of action, it's a game of reaction. And so I want my kids thinking freely out there and reacting, and not worried about, if their pinky toe is pointing the right direction in a trap or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what I'm hoping that it will do for anybody listening is hopefully put some coaches at ease a little bit with the press, and that it's not necessarily this big, intricate, complicated system. It really, and it sounds like something that you've just emphasized over and over again, it's really just a mentality and a culture and an identity that is established and is known about here's what's expected out of you in terms of effort and physicality and what is needed to require. What's required in order to be successful, and that there'll be some things we tinker with and make sure that we adjust to, but really go out and be free. It's okay if you make some mistakes, but just having that culture of understanding the effort that's required seems to be the thing that is most important to you.
Well, and doesn't that kind of sum up basketball as a game? I mean, if you really think about it, a lot of times we overcomplicate the game with all these fancy plays and all these, boy, I can really draw this up. I can't count the number of times. It's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts about college basketball in a way, is that I feel like college basketball has become, I'm going to run a set that takes 30 seconds. They're going to defend it because they've scouted the set, and then we're going to set a high ball screen at the top of the key and play. And so a lot of me thinks maybe we're spending too much time teaching plays and not enough time developing players. And so I'm more concerned with, let me try to give these guys different tools that they can utilize, but then give them the freedom to go use them. And I think that, to me, kind of what you said just sums up basketball in general in my mind, is sometimes we overcomplicate things and try to be too fancy and too precise with 100 different plays, where if we utilize that time developing players and developing different skill sets, then we might not have to have as many fancy plays.
Right. Yeah, because then they have the ability to think more, be more free, and they don't have to necessarily follow this super intricate step-by-step system where a coach is maybe overcomplicated things too much. I agree. So what I want to do to kind of wrap up here, Coach, is I want to give you some time to talk about a coaching moment of yours that you've had over the years, something that you've experienced while coaching that you think others listening would be able to learn from.
Wow. 24 years worth.
Yeah. It might be a lot to choose from, I know.
Yeah, golly. I mean, so, the easy ones that come to mind are, being part of state championship teams and those moments that are just kind of the culmination of all the hard work, the perseverance, the patience, being an assistant for 10 years and all those things. But I'll be honest, in that when I got into this, I always, I came from a good home with 2 great parents and a great family. We didn't have financial problems. We weren't, super rich or anything, but I got whatever I needed and a lot of times what I wanted. And yet my high school coach still had a profound impact on me. Even though most of the guys that I played with came from great homes with great parents. And I just remember thinking, I would like to be able to have that kind of impact on kids, even when they already have a good home situation. If I can have the kind of impact that my coach had on me, even though I had everything that I needed and wasn't missing anything, man, that's saying a lot about a coach. And so I think that the moments for me that stand out the most are when kids come back after they're done and they tell you, it can be something as simple as, man, coach, I missed this. I didn't realize how much I was going to miss this. Or it's, hey coach, you were right. I didn't realize that, but I'm so glad you told me those things, or I'm glad you stayed on me about that. Those are the things that stand out to me the most is, feeling like maybe, once a kid is 5 or 10 years removed from playing for you, that maybe he's drawing on some moment that you had with him, or some lesson that he learned from just playing basketball in general. And that basketball was somehow a vehicle to teach him about real life. So I would say, without giving specific moments, those are probably the ones that stand out to me the most as a coach. It's kind of like playing golf. You can have 17 bad holes, and on the 18th hole you hit one great shot, and it keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah.
I know that's the thing with me with coaching is that, just having that one kid that you reached, and you may not have even realized how much you reached him until several years later. But when you find that out, it's just like, wow, that's really what it's all about. Coaching my own kids, I'm getting to do that right now. Like I said, my oldest son, who was so sick, just graduated. My youngest son will be a junior this year. So really, really trying to cherish those moments. I feel like I'm getting to make up for some of the lost time when they were younger and I was coaching other people's kids, and spending more time with other people's kids than I was with my own.
Right.
So I would say that definitely ranks up there with the other things that I spoke of.
Yeah. I think it's so true that it's so rewarding when we're able to teach something or that's beyond basketball, and they remember that, or give them some sort of skill, or give them some sort of thought that they can use that carries over them with the later in life. And it's great when players come back and they let you know that. And I think it's also important too that we realize that there's gonna be players who we had an impact on that'll probably never come back and see us, or maybe they didn't even realize that it was us that had that impact on them, but we're still providing, something that's so much more than basketball. I think that's so true.
Yeah.
And then to wrap up, Coach, I always like to give my guest what I call the 60-second soapbox, where they can wrap up with a final thought, a final idea, something they want to emphasize and make sure that sticks with the listener. So to wrap up, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you your soapbox to give your closing thought.
Okay. Well, I would just say, and I think I touched on this earlier, but I just want kids today to understand. I want so badly for them to understand that, first of all, I think I've seen the stat before that, really only 2% of America is on Twitter. There's such a small percentage of our country that's actually on social media, and that most of what you see on social media is not completely accurate, and that to not get caught up in those things, but to be caught up in just becoming the best player that you can become, And that's easy for me to sit here and say. I've watched my own kids, how difficult that actually is. But if you can do it, you will be so much happier in the end. Don't allow yourself to be swept away by all the outside information that you have access to. Stay true to yourself and what you love. And really that doesn't matter what sport that you play. If you want to be a college basketball player, do everything you can to achieve that dream. And it will work out however it's supposed to work out. So many kids I see, are caught up in D1 or D2 or NAI or whatever. If you have the opportunity to go play college basketball anywhere, you are part of a very, very rare, small group. Doesn't matter what level it is. And that in and of itself is a phenomenal achievement. And I would encourage any kid, I don't care where the school is, if you have the opportunity to go do it, go do it. Even if it's just for a year, commit to a year and go do it. You can always come back home. You can always stop. But speaking from someone who didn't do it but had the opportunity, as a 46-year-old guy, it's still my biggest regret in life is that I didn't take that opportunity, and so now I'll never know what that was like. And so I always just try to encourage kids, if you do have that opportunity, go take it. Commit to a year. You can always come back home, but once you lose that opportunity to play at the next level, you can't get that back. And I think kids will have those opportunities if they can resist the outside noise and all the hanger-oners that will join on whenever you start to really get some attention, and stay true to yourself and stay true to that small circle that's been there with you from the beginning.
Absolutely. Love it. Take those chances if they're available to you, and social media can definitely skew our perceptions of things when it's definitely not encompassing of what reality actually is. So absolutely. Well, this is great. I think newer coaches, there's a lot that they can learn from this in terms of not just pressing, but about just coaching and just what coaching opportunities are right for them. And I think there's a lot that they're going to get from this, and veteran coaches too. Hopefully, if they're listening, can take some time to reflect and think about their own practices, again, not just with the press, but just overall in their coaching identity. Coach Davis, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insight. Good luck going forward in this upcoming season, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach Hernandez. I appreciate it. And if there's ever anything I can do, don't ever hesitate.
I will probably be taking you up on that. Thank you again. And thank you all of you for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.